Good evening, everyone. Welcome to On the Case with me, Detective Alex Cardinale. I hope you guys and gals are having a great start to your week thus far. Today, I'm going to be talking about one of the most shocking crimes to ever happen in the United States of America and in the state of Illinois. Now, I've talked about shootings, I've talked about stabbings, I've talked about suicide, but I think tonight's crime is one of the worst crimes I'm ever going to discuss here on the Case with Alex Cardinale. This is one of the most popular crimes because it shocked America and it was a really tragic and really sad case. This case was featured on many investigation discovery TV shows, including Web of Lies, and I'm sure it was featured on other crime television as well. And now it's being featured here on the Case with Detective Alex Cardinale. So this week's crime case takes place in Illinois from May of 2009. Chris Coleman murdered his wife Sherri and their two young sons, Garrett and Gavin, because of an affair he was having. Chris Coleman was cheating on his wife with a mistress, and ultimately he did the ultimate family betrayal. Not only did he lie to them and have them fearing for their lives because he was posing as someone that was coming out to get Chris with death threats and messages, ultimately he later killed them by strangling them to death. A very, very sad case. So this case centers around sex, love, family, affairs, betrayal, and strangulation. It's a very hard case to talk about and a very sad case. So I'm going to talk about everything you need to know about the Coleman family murders and the Chris Coleman case, and I'll share my thoughts on this case at the end of the show. As always, you're free to share your thoughts on the Coleman murders in the comments of today's video. So feel free to share your thoughts on the comments and I'll react to your thoughts on the Coleman murders. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. My dear friend Jeremy Stellhorn is in the house. And my friend Jeremy actually lives in Illinois. So this happened right by him, as a matter of fact. And Jeremy says, that happened by me. I went to school with the lead investigator. Coleman's parents are ministers in Chester. Yes, that's very true. Chris Coleman's parents are ministers, and they should be very ashamed of their son, but they were actually sticking up for what their son did. And we'll talk about that as the show progresses. So thank you, Jeremy, for tuning in. I hope you enjoy this episode. So, as always, we're going to start this show with things you need to know about this crime. So, here is what to know about this crime, the Coleman murders. And we're going to begin by looking at a picture of the family of Coleman, Chris Coleman's family. So, obviously, Chris Coleman is the bald headed guy in this picture. The woman he is sitting next to is his wife, Sherri Coleman, and those are the two sons, Garrett and Gavin Coleman. And unfortunately, Sherri, Garrett, and Gavin Coleman were strangled to death by a person that was supposed to protect them and love them, their father and husband. It is absolutely Sad, tragic, and awful. I feel so bad for Sherri, Garrett, and Gavin for having to lose their life like that because Chris lied to them. He had them fearing for their lives, thinking someone was going to come attack Chris and their family and them, but deep down it was the monster that is Chris. And this is a picture of Chris Coleman and his wife, Sherri. They look like a happy couple, but beneath the surface, Chris and Sherri Coleman definitely had their issues. And sadly, it led to the horrendous actions that took place one night in May of 2009. So let's learn some more about this case. Chris Coleman was born in 1977 to two Christian pastors, Ron and Connie Coleman. He and his two brothers were raised in their parents' non denominational Christian church and learned conservative values and teaching of the Bible. So they learned conservative values and teachings from the Bible. So basically, they followed the Bible. Those who knew young Chris Coleman described him as mild tempered and even sensitive. His father said the first time Chris was present when they butchered a rabbit, the boy was distraught. When Chris was in high school, a recruiter from the United States Marine Corps came to his school. Chris was impressed and inspired, so he signed up for the Marine Corps. He entered the military right out of high school and did very well in the Marines. According to his father, he would have stayed in the Marine Corps for his entire career, except Bill Clinton and Monica, and all that was a disappointment. While Chris was still in the Marines, however, he met another member of the USA military, Sherri West. Sherri West was born in 1977 and was raised in Cook County, Illinois. Sherri was a member of the United States Air Force. In August of 1997, Chris came to visit his parents in Chester, Illinois. He brought Sherri with him. He introduced Sherri to his parents, but they were not overly impressed. Ron Coleman said she was a worldly little girl, little short shorts, tattoo on her leg, not the person we thought he'd be with. Quickly afterwards, the couple married to the surprise of Chris's parents. They eloped in private, but according to Chris's parents, he immediately had regrets. My gosh, he was raised in the church. He was repentant and broken over it. The Colemans soon learned that Chris and Sherri were expecting a baby. Chris and Sherri welcomed their first son on April 30th, 1998, as their son, Garrett Dominic Eugene Coleman, was born. They welcomed another son in 2000, Gavin Christopher Coleman. The couple settled in Columbia, Illinois, a small town just over the Mississippi River from Missouri. Both boys loved sports and played for the Columbia Blue Jays football team. Sherri was a housemaker, and Chris worked for Joyce Meyer Ministries across the river in St. Louis, Missouri. Chris and Sherri did not have a perfect marriage. In fact, they fought about a lot of things. First, Chris's job was one of the things they fought over, since he would often be on the road traveling with Joyce Meyer. He traveled more than he was home, protecting Joyce Meyer on the road. This was hard on Sherri and the boys. The boys kept a countdown calendar on the refrigerator in anticipation for when their father would return home. So Chris Coleman worked as a bodyguard for a very popular and controversial religious television figure by the name of Joyce Meyer. Joyce Meyer had a lot of hate, but she also had some fans. So you could say she was a rather controversial but popular TV religious figure. A second point of contention was money. Chris and Sherri constantly fought over money. Chris made a good salary, over $100,000 per year, but Sherri spent money quickly. She enjoyed shopping, going on mission trips, and donating to charities. Chris would sometimes get upset with her spending habits, and they occasionally fought about this. A third issue in the marriage was a lack of display of affection. Chris was not a very affectionate person, and those who knew the couple said they rarely saw him hug or kiss Sherri or his sons. In fact, friends of Sherri said that she confided in them that Chris was never affectionate with her, not even during sex. The couple seemed to have different ideas on family as well. Chris's conservative family never quite accepted Sherri. Sherri was affectionate and loving as a mother. She was fun loving, and her children were her entire life. Chris was more of the strict disciplinarian father. He had expectations of excellence from his children in all things, from manners to sports performance. Despite turmoil in the marriage, Sherri was committed to working things out with Chris. She told her friends that she just loved him too much to give up on the marriage. And now here is where things take a weird and sad and tragic twist. In November of 2008, things in the marriage got much worse. Chris told the friend he planned to divorce Sherri, but was going to wait until after the holidays to talk to her. Meanwhile, Sherri told the friend that she suspected Chris was having an affair. So, somewhat, Sherri knew about the affair, or she surmised it. She had introduced Chris to a friend of hers and now suspected the two were romantically involved. Despite all this, Sherri remained hell bent to make the marriage work. Chris had reservations about divorce, as well as it may compromise his position with Joyce Meyer Ministries. In November of 2008, Chris had started receiving death threats through Joyce Meyer Ministries. The televangelist made massive amounts of money through her speaking engagements and ministry, and some people believe she misused those funds. It was not uncommon for some nasty emails and letters to come through, but now those letters seem to be directed at Chris Coleman. One even said, "Your family is done. I will kill them as they sleep." So now it is time to talk about the actual crime. The receiving of the death threats, the writing of the actual death threats, and then the eventual strangulation murders of Sherri Coleman, Garrett Coleman, and Gavin Coleman. All right. So in November of 2008, the death threats and messages started coming in. So that's when this crime first began. The death threats accused Joyce Meyer of preaching bullshit and threatened Chris Coleman's family, saying, "I will kill them all while they sleep." The emails and letters came to Chris's work email and straight to the Coleman house. They kept coming, getting progressively more threatening. And there were even letters at the Coleman front door, which is very stressful. Chris had sent them to local law enforcement who had been keeping an extra eye on the house while Chris was on business trips. His neighbor, who was an officer with the Columbia Police Department, had a camera pointing at the house just in case. The final letter arrived in April of 2009 and said, "This is my last warning. Your worst nightmare is about to happen." On the morning of May 5th, 2009, Chris Coleman left his home at 5:45 a.m. He drove across the river to St. Louis to complete his morning workout. He said he had called Sherri just a few minutes after he left the house to make sure she was awake. He said he called and texted her several more times that morning, but did not get a response. When he was on his way home, he called his neighbor, the Columbia, Illinois police officer, and asked him to check on Sherri and the boys. He said he was on the JB Bridge and about 5 minutes away from home. But it actually took about 13 minutes for Chris Coleman to get home in what should have been a 5-minute trip. Another officer met Detective Justin Barlow, who was the Chris Coleman and Coleman's family neighbor at the Coleman house. The two quickly discover a window with the screen out in the back of the house. The two called for backup, but then entered the home. They both described an overwhelming scent of spray paint as they came in the house. Unsure if anyone was still in the house, they were cautious with guns drawn. Spray painted on the walls were the following sayings: "Punished, I am always watching, and you have paid." At 6:56 a.m., Chris Coleman arrived home. Knowing this was probably not going to end well, the officer asked him to stay outside while they went upstairs. It was quickly noted that Chris took 13 minutes to complete what should have been a 5-minute drive. Authorities went upstairs and found the deceased bodies of Garrett, Gavin, and Sherri Coleman. They had been strangled to death by a cord that was never found. So the police chaplain informed Chris Coleman that his family was dead. He dropped to the ground and started sobbing. His father and Joyce Mayer arrived shortly thereafter to comfort Chris. Chris was sitting inside an ambulance with the chaplain comforting him. The chaplain said Chris looked down at his knuckles and there were red marks. The chaplain asked him about the marks, and Chris began to punch the gurney over and over again. Chris was brought into the Columbia Police Department for an initial interview. He explained that he spent the day before playing with his children and then watching television. He and Sherri put the boys to bed and then cuddled. Chris said she fell asleep in his arms. He told them how he got up early to work out and tried calling Sherri several times throughout the workout to make sure she was up. He said when she didn't answer, he got very worried and asked his neighbor to go check on the family in light of the recent threats they had been receiving. One thing the authorities found interesting is that Chris never mentioned his own security system, which may have caught the intruder on tape. Authorities had to prompt him. Neither his nor the neighbor's security tapes showed anyone coming or going from the house other than Chris Coleman. They asked Chris about marital problems, which he mostly denied. He does tell them he has a close friend by the name of Tara Lentz, but denies a sexual relationship or an affair. Tara Lynch was a friend of Sherri's from high school. She had introduced Tara to her husband in November the year before. Tara Lynch was being interrogated down in Florida already. Tara explained that she and Chris Coleman were indeed having an affair. In fact, they had exchanged promise rings. The two had planned to marry in January of 2010. Chris failed to mention that he had already canceled the family's trip to Disney World and instead booked a cruise to the Virgin Islands for Tara and himself. According to Tara, Chris was going to serve Sherri with divorce papers the day of the murders. She had began registering for wedding gifts, looking for a home in St. Louis for the family, and discussing baby names. So this awful lady, Tara, was willing to let Chris destroy his existing family so that she could marry him and have a family of her own. How evil of a woman can Tara be? Tara also played a role in the murders of um, Sherri, Gavin, and Garrett because she convinced Chris to commit this heinous act. So I believe Tara should be in jail as well. So, as the investigation continued, neighbors and friends were appalled to learn that Chris had dismantled a memorial for his wife and children from their front yard. He also moved out several boxes of their belongings by mid May. Chris's behavior and lies about his affair certainly painted him in a bad light, but didn't mean he was a murderer. When DNA testing came in from under Sherri's nails, it was consistent with Chris Coleman, but was not a definitive match. Pieces of the paint from the walls, laptop computers, Blackberry, and other items were also sent to be examined. The Cyber Crimes Unit investigated these threatening emails, which came from an address destroychris at gmail.com. They were able to determine the IP address in which the emails originated was Chris Coleman's own laptop. Someone had used his own laptop to create and send the threatening emails. They also realized that the letters had several misspellings in common with known writings from Chris Coleman. The autopsies determined that Sherri, Garrett, and Gavin were all killed by strangulation. They had the breath taken away from them. They could no longer breathe, unfortunately. The medical examiner put the time of death before 5 a.m. Imagine being killed before 5 o'clock in the morning. Horrific. When Chris Coleman was still in the home. According to the examiner, Sherri's body showed signs of rigor mortis, which was crucial in determining the time of death. Finally, the writings on the walls and spray paint were examined. The handwriting of the messages were the handwriting of the messages was consisted with known writings from Chris Coleman, according to a forensic handwriting specialist. The spray paint was determined to be a specific brand, and the color was candy apple red. Upon examining Chris's bank statements, they found a purchase from a small hardware store in St. Louis from a few months prior to the murders. The store kept very good records and shocked authorities by confirming Chris had purchased a can of candy apple red spray paint. In May of 2009, Chris Coleman was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first degree murder. Soon after, Sherri's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Chris. This would prevent him from liquidating any assets, including selling the family home. Chris Coleman awaited trial as friends of Sherri's came forward. One friend claimed that Chris told Sherri he wanted a divorce, but Sherri refused to give him one. She told me he was tired of her keeping him from God's destiny for his life, said Megan Turnview, a friend of Sherri's. Chris Coleman went to trial at the end of April 2011. The star witness was Tara Lentz, Chris's mistress and Sherri's high school friend, the woman that Chris did all the murders for. Tara testified about the two exchanging promise rings, their future wedding plans, and testified about proactive photos that she sent to Chris and similar photos he had sent to her. Dr. Raj Nadari, the pathologist, testified that she could not pinpoint the time of death, but based on liver temperature, she believed it to be between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. in the morning. Dr. Michael Baden, a world famous pathologist, testified that his analysis put the time of death at around 3 a.m. Even Joyce Mayer was called to testify, stating that Chris would have likely lost his job had she known of the affair or had he divorced his wife. The prosecution's theory was clear. Christopher Coleman was carrying on an affair with the vivacious Tara Lentz. He regretted his quick marriage to Sherri and wanted to build a new life with Tara. He started sending himself threatening messages shortly after his affair with Tara began. He told Tara that he was serving Sherri with divorce papers on the very day Sherri and the boys were murdered. He bought the spray paint in advance and planned the murders for months. So this was premeditated. He planned to spray paint the walls. He planned to murder them well in advance. In the very early mornings of May 5th, 2009, he strangled his wife and both of his sons while they slept. He then spray painted the messages on the walls, staged the window to make it look like an intruder, and went to work out. He began calling Sherri only minutes after leaving the house to wake her up, which authorities believe was actually to set his alibi. He purposely took extra time driving home to ensure police would discover the bodies before he arrived. When someone noticed marks on his knuckles, he began punching a gurney to explain the injuries away. The former Marine and pastor's son was found guilty on all three counts of first-degree murder 2 years after the crimes in May 2011. Chris was spared the death penalty and sentenced to 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. The judge cited the abolition of the death penalty in Illinois in 2011 as a key factor in his decision, as it was set to be abolished July 1st of that year. Ron and Connie Coleman were never convinced of their son's guilt. In fact, they defended him at every turn. When faced with the fact that their son had an affair, Chris's father, Ron, said Sherri told Chris all the time that he was moody and he wasn't affectionate enough. She never did compliment him. That's why he was so attracted to Tara. He also repeatedly told media outlets that Chris had an affair because Sherri failed to fulfill her wifely duties. But that's not okay to murder somebody. So as of 2020, all of Christopher Coleman's appeals have been denied. Chris Coleman will likely never be free. but that will not bring back Sherri, Garrett, and Gavin. In one of the most horrific crimes ever committed in southern Illinois and the United States, one innocent woman and two young boys were robbed of their entire future by the person they trusted the most. This is a case of ultimate betrayal. And again, Chris Coleman was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Very, very sick case. And I'm glad that Chris Coleman will never see the light of day ever again. He deserves to rot in hell and rot in prison. And think about what he did to his wife, Sherri, and his two young boys over some whore by the name of Tara. So we have a comment from YouTube by the name of C. Rolf, and he says, "Crazy case, bro." Yes, this is a very tragic and horrific and awful crime case. Now, one thing that irks me about this case is the fact that Chris's parents, Ron and Connie Coleman, defend Chris at each and every turn. They make it sound like Chris was being abused by Sherri and that Sherri was an awful wife, but Sherri was a loving person, and I'm sure she really loved Chris. But Chris was a cheater. He wanted to have sex with Tara, and he wanted to end his relationship with Sherri, and he wanted to start a whole new family, and he wanted to get away from Sherri and his sons. And he figured the best way to do that would be to murder them. Very, very sick individual, and I hope he gets what is coming to him. They say karma is a bitch, so hopefully karma will bite Chris Coleman in the ass. All right, so now I'm going to talk about my thoughts on this crime. You know, first I will say that I feel so bad for Sherri's family because they lost their daughter and they lost their grandsons, Garrett and Gavin Coleman. Sherri and her sons were very loved by the neighborhood, and Chris took them away from the neighborhood and from Sherri's parents. So my thoughts and prayers go to Sherri and her young boys who lost their life, and of course Sherri's parents. So this case is definitely one that I will always remember because it proves that you can never trust anybody. Even someone that could be your best friend could turn out to be a manipulator, and they can manipulate your husband into dating her and possibly marrying her and death. Tara was responsible for this crime as well. She should have been sentenced to prison for at least 20 years, in my opinion, because she egged Chris on to file that divorce. But instead of filing a divorce, Chris did the cowardly thing and he murdered an innocent woman and two innocent young boys in their sleep when they could not defend themselves. A very sad and awful crime. And I hope he pays and he burns in hell for what he did to these people. Very, very sad. So my thoughts on this case is that it's very awful. The fact that he had the family very scared and very intimidated. He had his wife and their kids thinking that someone was coming out to harm himself, the father, but it was actually the father that was behind all those threatening messages and those death threats. And then eventually he became the evil and murdered his wife and the two young boys. Very sick case, and I feel bad. So, very hard case to talk about, but it is a case that will go down in the history of the United States of America in Illinois as one of the worst and one of the most shocking family betrayals. Imagine your father or your husband, who's supposed to be a guy that protects you, but he ends up murdering you. Very, very sad case. All right. Post your thoughts on this crime in the comments. I'd like to hear your reactions and your thoughts on this crime. Let me know in the comments. I would like to thank everybody that watched this video live, and I want to thank everyone that's watching this video in the replay. Whether you're watching it live or not, I appreciate your view. If you enjoyed this episode of On the Case with Detective Alex Cardinale, please do me a favor and share this show on social media. All you need to do is click copy and paste on the YouTube link and paste it on Facebook, Instagram, etc., so that your crime-loving friends can watch this video and learn about the Coleman murders. Next Monday, we have another crime that's a little bit shocking. And it's a crime that you don't hear about too often. It's a kind of a rare crime. The crime I'm going to talk about next week is known as swatting. And swatting is generally done by teenage video gamers. It's generally a prank that can turn deadly. It's where you call 911 reporting false emergencies, like someone being held hostage at gunpoint, a mass murder, etc. This will cause police and the FBI and the SWAT team to arrive at whatever location the swatter uses, and it can be tragic. And next week, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the swatter, Tyler Barris. Now, Tyler Barris, he was a famous swatter, and unfortunately, his swatting act resulted in the death of an innocent bystander who was shot and killed by an FBI detective because of Tyler Barris's fake swatting calls. So next Monday, May 2nd, 2022, 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific, learn about swatting and the death of that innocent man and the swatter, Tyler Barris. So with that being said, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel if you're a new viewer, the legendary Alex Cardinale, for all my episodes of crimes that I've done and for all future episodes of On the Case with Alex Cardinale. Remember, On the Case with Detective Alex Cardinale airs each and every Monday night at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific, right here on my YouTube channel, the legendary Alex Cardinale. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great week. Stay safe. And if you see someone committing a crime, say something. Never be afraid to call 911 if you see a crime being committed. Thank you guys for watching, and have a great rest of your day and a great week. And I will see you on the next episode of On the Case with Alex Cardinale.